The word reparations is defined as the action of making amends for a wrong one has done by providing payment or other assistance to those who have been wronged. However, does money and this assistance we speak of make up for many years of enslavement, brutal beatings, and stealing minerals and jewels? The 5 forms of reparation are restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. Our question is, given the fact that he has always vowed to modernize the monarchy and be fair, does the new King of England intend to explore reparations and bring justice to the people of Africa and India? That is the magic question. Tonight, we discuss the crown, reparations. Will we ever see it? Our guests, very passionate about the subject, are Christopher Davis, Nana Safohene, Ahanta Tribe, and Angelique McKay, Queen Mother, Ahanta Tribe. I'm Kendeno Knowles, filling in for Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you on the other side of this break. Welcome back. Before we get into our topic for tonight, let's take a look at what's been happening in the news since we last spoke. A portion of the Queens Highway in Long Island was renamed after businessman and community builder Joseph B. Carroll. Long Islanders were ecstatic about the news. The monumental day brought his loved ones and top-ranking government officials to honor his memory. Now, I'm always happy to see when nation builders are given their flowers. We don't see it enough. At least we got the national honors underway, and we've seen a lot of Bahamians who have really helped their communities, honored for their work and service to country. It's a great story that we were following. Also, digital wallet Canoe pays, taking their services regionally and across the pond. Chairman and co-founder Nicholas Rees saying the company has been making wonderful advancements in the world of payments and the technology, and he wants to take this to the United Kingdom. Now, seeing this is what you call Bahamian ingenuity in action, and to see the way Canoe has grown over the years since its inception. We saw what they did for us during the pandemic with the travel visa being the payment portal for that, and to see them just growing and evolving is great to see. And also the stories of Hurricane Dorian survivors to be turned into a docu-series produced by communications professor Dr. Juliet Storr. She says she hopes it can be used to help others that are experiencing disaster, mental health symptoms. She volunteered at shelters on New Providence following the deadly hurricane and recalls one of the stories that jump-started her passion for the project. We're going into 4 years since Dorian, and the stories are still heart-wrenching. The fact that we've got so many families still reeling and rebuilding it lets us know that there's still a whole lot more work to be done, and that we cannot forget those who were greatly impacted. That docu-series, I think, will help. I'm certainly excited to see it once it's done. And the Bahamas government preparing to redevelop the Grand Bahama International Airport and break ground for a new hospital. The Minister of Grand Bahama recently said plans are well underway. This obviously exciting news for Grand Bahamians. The head of one of the heads of RF Bank and Trust was in the news this week talking about all these developments happening on that island and how they will help Grand Bahama's economy in the long run. Great to see it, particularly for healthcare on that island, Iran being the only hospital there now. So I'm sure Grand Bahamians are excited to see that take shape. And following that landmark ruling on citizenship, Prime Minister Philip Davis said paternity tests will be necessary in some instances. Speaking on the sidelines of the groundbreaking ceremony for the new hospital in Grand Bahama, Davis says there are some presumptions that will first have to be fleshed out. Quote, "We need to ensure the daddy is the daddy," he said. That story put me in the mind of Murray. I think millennials and others would know who and what I'm talking about. Well, that's it for Since We Last Spoke. We take a break now and come back with our discussion on the crown, reparations. Will we ever see it? Stay close. You are watching On the Record. Welcome back. As promised, our discussion leads us to the crown, reparations. Will we ever see it? Our guests are Christopher Davis, Nana Safohene, Ahanta Tribe, and Angelique McKay, Queen Mother Ahanta Tribe. Welcome to On the Record.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you so much for being here for the discussion tonight. Before we start, though, before we start on reparations, I want you to explain your roles in the Ahanta Tribe, starting with you, Christopher.
Yes, well, I'm Nana Safohene, proper name John Kwao II. And to make a very long story short, I'm a researcher, Pan-Africanist first and foremost, and I have rediscovered the identity of our hero that we know as John Canoe, who was a general that fought against the transatlantic slave trade, the British and the Dutch specifically. And amazingly, it's still quite surreal for me, that throne that was occupied by John Canoe I was then bestowed upon me, and I am now officially known as John Canoe II, proper name Nana Safohene, John Kwao, John Canoe's real name, the second.
John Canoe. People at home probably know that name, right, because it's connection to John Canoe, right?
Yes.
And that's part of our cultural identity. And before we go on, speaking about identity, tell us about your role in the tribe.
Well, I am the Queen Mother to Nana, and Queen Mother Asafa Churiba of Pakasu and the Ahanta people of Western Ghana. And Asafa Churiba is Queen of the Warriors, because Nana here is King of the Warriors. So that would be me.
All right. What made you, I'm curious, what made you want to delve into your roots this way?
Well, it began with me seeing what I would see as a desperate need, just for some African Bahamian culture, a focus on that, because we've always had a very whitewashed historical narrative, and that is why I actually called my first published book Black Rinse, right, to kind of counter that. And I always knew that this story about who John Canoe was, being a slave, begged the British government for a day off and all of that stuff, it never sat well with anybody, any Bahamian, I don't think, And that's how it all started. And essentially, it was a little village in Princesstown where they were saying that this guy, John Canoe, came from. I went there, met with Abu Sapin, which means family head, Chief Augustine Yao. And of course, my brother, one of my right-hand men, Alice Kofi, who was the oral historian for Princesstown. And they told me all about him. And then we made the connection, and we traveled all over Ghana, and apparently this was a general popular all over Ghana. And it was just a magical experience.
All right, Great Britain and the Bahamas, if you will, have a new head of the monarchy, and we're going to get right into this, right? In the person of King Charles III, in your opinion, do you think the monarchy serves a solid purpose, especially because you've delved into the roots, you understand where we are and how we've gotten to this point? So I think the question really is relevant today to know, really, do you think it serves a solid purpose still?
Not only does it not serve a solid purpose, it actually harms us on every level, mentally, financially, socially, and I'd even dare say spiritually. And the way that people of African descent should view the British government, these colonial governments, is not different as the way that an Ashkenazi Jew from Western Europe would view Hitler and the Nazi Party. And we have a statue of Queen Victoria in our Parliament Square. and Queen Victoria is responsible for the death of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Africans, leading through social Darwinism, leading up to the scramble for Africa. And so for me as a Bahamian, it's actually quite embarrassing that we continue to commemorate these things. And there's also been this kind of attempt to downplay the role of a governor general, right? When the governor general has the power to remove voted officials by us. The governor general is the head of the state who represents the crown. Leaders that we elect cannot take office unless they swear to this royal family. So King Chuck, as I call him, has no bearing in my lifestyle, and we should look to separate and furthermore demand reparations. You know, and now it's this kind of thing where they're trying to act like, you know, everything's okay. And certainly the Bahamas did play a role in the well-being and the wealth that we see in all of Western Europe today.
With the journey that you've been on, I know that you have a perspective that most Bahamians may not, or many Bahamians may not have. Has that journey really helped, I guess, strengthen your resolve for why you feel this way?
Oh yeah, most definitely. To focus back on our people, the Ahanta and the Nzima people. So the relationship between Ahanta and Nzima is quite similar to the relationship between Bahamians and Turks Islanders. You know, we one, but we ain't one.
Right.
We just separate countries, but we one. We speak similarly, all of that. When you reach the Ahanta region, for example, what is our most powerful herb, medicinal plant? Sorcy. These people burn sorcy and breathe it in when they have chest colds. They use sorcy times 10. You know, they suck their teeth the same way we do. They have these doughy dishes with tomato-based spicy fish dishes similar to stew fish, and you're dipping it in and you're eating it with your hands and all of these things. The similarity is, and that's not even speaking about what you can see. You know, I met a woman in Ghana who is a splitting image of my mother-in-law.
That's interesting. And to that point, what then do we really need Britain for? I know there are people asking that question every day. We've heard it with the debate that we've seen across the region.
Of course. Well, what we need Britain for, I wouldn't say need, but what we need them to do are return artifacts, return our social heirlooms, the most famous of which would be like the Benin bronzes, but this is also connected to the Bahamas. They need to pay reparations. Just to touch on one example, we have Roll, right? Probably the most prevalent surname in the Bahamas.
All right.
John Roll, I refuse to call him Lord, but John Roll over there in England, he made a lot of money from the Roll plantation.
You're getting ahead of us. You're getting ahead of our Q&A.
Right, but you understand. But it's there, you know, and the Bahamas, as I said, has been fully involved and contributed to what became the Industrial Revolution.
I want to bring you into this and want to find out from you your thoughts and perspective on this. And the question again, what do we really need Britain for?
To use a phrase from Tony McKay's song, "Pay me what you owe me." If they could just divide what it is that they would have gained financially on the backs of enslaved and captured Africans, they could begin to apologize in that way, because mere words are not enough. It's not enough. Actions speak louder than words. I know, for example, there's a black stool from the Ahanta region that they have. They need to begin to give us that which belongs to us and give us some of the money that they would have earned, like I said, on our backs. Pay me what you owe me.
Yeah. Do you think, though, that the Bahamas can become fully independent of the monarchy and still survive as a nation?
Most definitely, you know, even from like a business standpoint, we are.
You seem very convicted about that.
Oh yeah, we are near to the biggest market. You know, even when you look at tourism, regardless of your thoughts or feelings on it, it is the thing that really has our country floating and moving along, financially at least. Most of those tourists don't come from England.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I see a cruel irony that when those from the Caribbean try to migrate to England, they are not received, you know, as they should be. given all that happened, you know. We absolutely don't need it. The problem is we've been convinced that we need it. This speaks to something that I bring up in my book, actually, called Anglophilia. The irrational love of all things English or all things British.
Yeah.
And this is what we suffer here in the Bahamas. And not just in the Bahamas, but throughout the so-called English-speaking African diaspora.
When did you author this book?
It came about 2 months ago, February, it came out.
Okay, so where can people find that?
They can find it at Dunkirk Studios,
Yeah.
Pompey Museum, Fort Fincastle, Fort Charlotte, and also Chapter 1 Bookstore and the library at the University of
All right,
the Bahamas.
interesting. So people who want to delve more into this and get a better understanding of perhaps our heritage and our journey really as a people should go and grab that,
And
right?
we would-
But I want to ask, because you brought up the Caribbean in your response there, but I want to know, do you admire the decision of Prime Minister Mia Mottley and the people of Barbados to make a go for it on their own? I mean, the question is whether we can do it without Britain. They've made the go, and do you admire
Mia Mottley is certainly, I might get in trouble for saying this, but she is one of my favorite politicians alive today, it's point blank period. And she has been leading the charge. And it actually, what we see Barbados doing should definitely inspire us, We know we used to always be in competition with Barbados. Many people don't know this. Actually, about 100 years ago.
And a lot of us won't admit it.
Right. About 100 years ago, it was just like a little competition or a little conflict between us about who would be called Little Britain.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
Now, look how far they have come and look where we are kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Now, the big issue for us is also constitutional.
Yeah.
Because in order for that to happen, you got to take it to a referendum. And then, I don't know, so you might have a leader who is fully ready to, but I think that the Bahamas was a place that the colonial powers that be wanted to hold on to so tightly.
Yeah.
So that's why it's more difficult.
Do you think we're stuck? Do you think
I don't think we're stuck.
Yeah.
I think that leaders' hands are proverbially tied, but I don't think that we're stuck, because at the end of the day, if you just do it, what can happen?
Yeah. Your thoughts on that?
I think that the majority of us are fearful of what will happen.
Yeah.
It seems as if the UK holds this safety net. And when you begin to think about it, what exactly is it that we're holding on to from them? Exactly like Nana would have said, tourism is our #1 industry, and we can count the numbers that come from there as opposed to somewhere else. So what exactly are we holding on to with that?
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
And although, it didn't start the slave trade, it is well known that the British Empire carried more Africans into bondage across the Americas than any other nation. We started to talk a little bit about that earlier, but I want to get your thoughts on that now.
Oh, yeah, I would love to. And that is just a part of, again, that Anglophilia that I spoke about. The British were also master propagandists. You understand? And so there's this propaganda that they ended slavery first and all this stuff, and then the Industrial Revolution happened. And people don't realize that right after chattel slavery, they went directly into social Darwinism. They used to have Africans on display in zoos. We talking about in London, we talking about zoo.
Explain that for the audience that's listening that's not familiar with that concept.
So you had the concept of human zoos that came out of social Darwinism. Darwin being the guy that did the theory of evolution. But he did it from a very racist place. He did it from a place of, well, these Africans are close to the monkeys. And they're actually, even after his work came out, claims that the gap between a European and an African is greater than the gap between an African and a chimpanzee or an orangutan. So this is what has been entrenched. 100 years ago, Harvard professors would tell you this. You understand? So again, it is because we have lost sight of exactly what happened. Just to point on one thing for 20 seconds, so there's a man named Ota Benga, who was from the Congo region. We get Congo Town in Andres, Congo Town, Foxhill. You get Congo roots in you too, as we discussed before the show, right?
We did.
Right. So this man, Ota Benga, was what they misnomer a pygmy. The little small Africans that come from the Congo region. Proper name, Twa. You see, so even the name we call them, pygmy, and we just don't understand what the British has in fact done to us. Even in India, just from them importing food from India, upwards of 30 million people starved to death in a famine. And yet we have this mythos that Queen Victoria freed the slaves and all of this. Queen Victoria got a loan from a man named Nathan Rothschilds, right? So this is no conspiracy theory, you know, and that loan was used to compensate our slave masters in the Bahamas, in Antigua, in Jamaica, and all of these British colonies. The problem is, from the beginning, we have been convinced that colonization is in fact a good thing. You understand? In the Bahamas.
In what ways? In what ways?
Well, you have, for example, this age of piracy. I'm also excited to say I'm working feverishly alongside the Ministry of Education in terms of rehashing and making sure our children learn these things, right? So in the sense of what we're speaking about colonization, Woodes Rogers is seen as this big protagonist that came in and he just swiped this one sword and then all piracy was gone, right? But let's use Black Bear as an example, who they tell us is the worst pirate. Black Bear had about 8 quartermasters, which would have been his second in command, so to speak, on the various vessels. At least 5 of those quartermasters were runaway Africans who were at risk of being enslaved. So here we have the man they tell us is the worst pirate, and then you have people like Woodes Rogers, who himself was a slave trader. When he came into debt in 1713, his action to recoup his debt was to go to Madagascar, kidnap a bunch of Africans, working on behalf of the East India Company, I believe, the South Seas Company, and took those Africans to Southeast Asia. And when he came to the Bahamas, he did the same thing. The second slave ship coming from Southwest Ghana, where John Canute also comes from, and he brought about 135 people in partnership with his son. And he wanted to turn the Bahamas into a plantation colony. Simple.
Quite interesting history, right? Especially when you delve deeper into it, you begin to understand there are so many missing parts of the story, and still, so much of what we are taught today, still missing a lot of that, right? But still on slavery, was it simply to have servants? Was it simply that, or was it more so that people could make money from selling others?
The root of all of this was economics. And everything that came behind that was a justification for this. It was extremely profitable. As a matter of fact, on some voyages, transatlantic slaving voyages, more members of the crew died than the actual captives on board. It was high, risky business, extremely wealthy. The first millionaire in Spain, the first millionaire in France, and the first millionaire in England, Jermaine Beckford. Was it Jermaine? But Beckford was his surname, and he's the first millionaire in British history.
Capitalism boom, in essence,
right, thank you very much. So it was all economic. So you also had the Catholic Church, Pope Nicholas V, who made a papal bull called Dum Diversas and Still Different. I give all you good Christian nations permission to reduce to perpetual servitude all infidel peoples, meaning anyone who don't believe what I believe, they don't have a soul, they can be enslaved. This is the same tool that Columbus was armed with, right? And so these are some of the more difficult pills to swallow. You know, the Bible was one of the major tools used in our colonization, and it was more effective than the gun in many ways. That's just truth. You understand? And so we now have to, you know, and it's not about religion, it's actually about economics and politics. And that propaganda was what made it okay to do this to these people.
Your thoughts on this? I'm curious. I want to hear your perspective too.
The topic of slavery, okay? We tend to see so much whitewashing with it, and we don't highlight the horrors associated with slavery. Even when we see these movies, you see a little bit of violence. You don't see the harsh, violent acts that were put on our ancestors. When we went, the first trip we went to Africa, and to Ghana, we went to Elmina Castle. That was one of the most emotional experiences in my life. I'm not a shy, timid, quiet woman. So I went to the female quarters, which were always close to the soldiers' quarters, eh?
Yeah.
And we know why. And there was this giant ball, heavy ball, that they would put around the ankles of the unruly females. And I said that I needed to lift that because I knew if I was there, I would be grouped into that section. I could not even lift it. Nana had to lift it for me to hold it, to feel the weight. And I couldn't take it past my knees, even with his assistance. We must never, ever forget the horrors that were inflicted on our ancestors.
Certainly. And there's so much more for us to discuss tonight. We're going to take a quick break here and come back with the beef of our discussion, the crown, reparations. Will we ever see it? You're watching On the Record. Stay with us.
If they give us our things back, they will go broke. Because even what we pay to go into those museums, we fund them.
Welcome back to On the Record. We're going to jump right back into our discussion with Angelique McKay and Christopher Davis. We're discussing the crown, reparations. Will we ever see it, right? Do you think King Charles will do right by the families of those who were enslaved by implementing reparations? Do you think we'll see that?
King Chuck will never be able to do that. The loan that I mentioned earlier that Queen Victoria got to compensate our slave masters, the British taxpayers did not finish paying off that loan until about 2015, 2016. We as African people, descendants of African people, have to realize that the entire well-being of their society, Liverpool was a small fishing village. And in 200 years, because of the transatlantic slave trade, it became the center of the Industrial Revolution, industrializing the entire world, and we never looked back ever since. All of that is absolutely rooted in slavery. So no, Chuck never, ever will give us full reparations. It'll probably just be a little band-aid, a little bone here and there, a little thing here and there to make it look good. But in order for them to do it, it'll ruin them if they did it fairly.
Yeah, and may I ask, do you think this will be a new day in the monarchy with the implementation of the much talked about reparations?
I don't think that it will happen as swiftly as we would like for it to happen, but it will happen. And the reason I think, and I know that it will happen, the ancestors are now walking. And they're walking strong, and they're walking tall. There is a shift, and it's going to come. It's going to come. And it's not going to be an easy thing for them, because the table will literally be turned. So, but the ancestors are walking.
When we talk about slavery and the pillaging of jewels, and it's something that you both touched on in the previous segment, many focus on Africa, but wouldn't we agree that India suffered most of the same? The much discussed Kohinoor diamond?
Yeah, well, the Kohinoor...
And it's infamous for being stolen by the British, and there are many more jewels from Africa and India still in the royal family's collection. With that said, do you really feel reparations will wipe out the memory of slavery and jewelry heists?
It certainly won't. There are certain aspects of the genocide, the Ma'afa, the great horrible happening, which is ongoing for those of us of African descent. When you look at things in its totality again and you understand the gravity of everything, it is impossible for them to pay. And so the problem is many of us see reparations as them cutting us a check and then we moving on. I disagree. Just as the effects...
You said it's impossible to pay.
Right, that's why I say, and we know that. Now, this might be a conversation for us to have the black man behind closed doors, but knowing this, that's why we push for it. So if you take a big loan from the bank and you can't pay it back, they coming for you. And eventually you go into court, they know you can't pay, but they getting something. And knowing that you can't pay. We know they can't pay. And all of these things. And again, reparations should be consistent.
So are we to just cut our losses in that instance?
No, we need to push even harder, and it should be something consistent. I mean, let's be honest, we sitting there speaking English right now. I have a Welsh last name. Well, I had one, if depends on how you look at it now, right? Right. But you get what I'm saying,
I get it.
And so politically, And because, and this is my biggest pet peeve, we have allowed them to blame us for our own genocide. Oduba Kawango, who was an African from the 1700s, also from Ghana, warned us about this. Do not let these Europeans blame you for your own genocide. This is what this man was saying. And this is what happens. So when
Victim blaming in
victim,
essence.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we see it all over.
Yeah.
You know, we see it all over. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, the Moors from Africa ruled England from AD 711 to 1492. It is said that the Moors taught the British and Europeans everything from banking to hygiene.
Yep.
Then, and knowing this, how then did Africans turn around and become slaves?
Oh, well, I will take a quote to the overall reason. I'll quote Dr. John Henry Clark, who in my opinion is one of our most brilliant scholars ever. And he said the number one reason is the tragic naivety of Africans. You have to understand it's also cultural, political, that aspect. Just to get, I don't have time to even expound on it, but the original intention was trade. The first place that they built in Africa was what Queen Mother mentioned, Elmina. Elmina means the mine, you know, and it pretty much is like some Portuguese term meaning, hey, gold is here. And they call the area the Gold Coast. Slowly but surely, as that labor demand increased in the Western Hemisphere, not only through more people moving over and establishing plantations, but through the murder and destruction of the indigenous Americans. And then they had to make up for that labor shortfall with Africans, right? Now, what happened then is we then become in survival mode. To use a perhaps troubling analogy, let's say a guy comes in there with a gun right now, you know, and he have us held up. You know, the first day or two, all us on one accord, and then after that first 3 days, we in what you call acute survival mode, right? So now I know Queen Mother Angelique, you know, she is a part of me, you know. So my wife Tamara, if she was here, same thing. Then I gotta, you understand?
Yeah.
Then I think about my son. You know, I saying, boy, I wonder if he got any children. He ain't got no children. Well, you know, he got to be the first. You know, now this is what acute survival mode brings. It brings out these things in us. Humans will do anything to survive. Another example would be when that plane crashed in the Alps and the rugby players and they resorted to cannibalism to survive. You understand?
Yeah.
Now, let's even use the most famous genocide of them all, the Holocaust. Now, and this ties into that victim blaming. This is why Africans and no African nation, the Bahamas, Nigeria, even Ghana, who is I see as the pinnacle, overall we lack political persuasion on a global stage. And it's because we have not been, in my opinion, aggressive enough in claiming what's ours. We have not been aggressive enough in holding those responsible who are responsible. And we've been stuck in this survival, acute survival mode. And as I close out this point, I'll just use an analogy that's quite famous. You have crab in a bucket, black crab syndrome, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The most important thing about that syndrome is crabs don't live in buckets, do they?
Quite interesting.
Right.
All of that interconnected to, in your assessment, lead to Africans then becoming enslaved.
Right. You see? And so this acute survival mode and all of that, and and then of course it was just the sheer brutality.
What then do you say to people that say that we are also, or that Africans are also to blame for the enslavement? I've heard that. I've been in debates before about that. You know, in conversation about this issue that we see, as we see racism continuing to rear its ugly head across the world. I mean, it's come up, and we've seen television and film, even recent film, I won't reference it right now, but that showed how Africans took part in that.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Well, I could tackle that easily. I'll try to.
Well, let's make it as brief as we can.
As briefly as I just got to say that. There are several different aspects that you have to look at. First of all, we have to define what is African. Africa is a continent, right? With many different countries. Nigeria has over 250 distinct languages and dialects. So when a Fawn and a Yoruba fight against each other, that's not the quote-unquote same people. They were of different religion, different language, different writing and all that. Let's make a parallel with Europe again. When Germany invaded France, they prayed to the same God. They used the same Latin-based languages. All of that. Yet we don't say, well, look at these Europeans. European on European crime and all that. You understand? So first of all, in defining blackness, we were lumped into one category. Now we've turned it around and used it for solidarity, and we have a shared history, and that is where the Pan-Africanism is born. Second point, again to that
So to
acute.
your point, in essence, not every African may have been involved in the
That's number one,
enslavement.
right. It's,
So
first
to
of-
basically
yeah.
generalize the fact that Africans, all Africans,
Right.
played a role in that is inaccurate in essence.
And it's even technical. So it would be like looking at
So
the Romans
Yeah.
and another group from there and calling them Italians. The
That's right.
term did not even exist, and they
Yeah.
did not see themselves as such.
I want you and I to talk more about that
Right.
offline. But
Right.
for now, I want to talk about reparations. Has there ever been a reparations program that worked, though? Have we seen a program that's worked?
We have sort of
Yeah.
with the Holocaust and World War II, and I say sort of because, of course, the Palestinians are the one who bear the brunt of that, but we don't want to get into that too much.
Yeah.
But when it comes,
We've seen a program that works.
of course, we've
right?
seen programs that work, and reparations is multifaceted. You have on a personal level, as you see and sometimes happen in the United States, one white family found out they were slave to this white family. There's actually a joke on Family Guy where the guy traced the white family that enslaved his family, and they only was able to afford to give him a pound of Rice Krispie treats. You see, but
Interesting.
Right,
Some critics
yeah.
of reparations are concerned about the idea of apologizing and or paying for
Yeah.
something no modern British citizen was a part of, and question whether reparations are even the way to resolve historical injustice. I want your thoughts on this, because would financial reparations absolve the UK, the United Kingdom, once and for all from its debt
It
to
would.
the generations of peoples affected by the transatlantic slave trade?
It would certainly not absolve them, but it would
Yeah.
be a big step in the right direction.
Yeah.
For those who are against reparations, for me, it's absolutely crazy. So we could even put all the atrocities on the side. My brother, I'm a Davis. There was a Davis plantation in Old Bidekit Island. Think about the thousands of hours of free labor. You understand? And
Yeah.
and for those who are not for it, fine. Maybe
Is this why you say it's impossible to pay?
it is impossible to pay. I
Yeah,
could go on
yeah.
and on about it for a week, but I know you don't have that type of time, right? But to bring it even closer to home, Crooked Island, even though it was only functioning for 25 years, there was documents and there was records taken over a 50-year period, and Crooked Island, standing alone, was the 5th largest exporter of West Indian cotton to Liverpool, functioning for half of the time of plantations in Guyana. That money was then used and inherited by a man named John Moss of Otterspool, Liverpool, who built the first inner-city railroad in human history between Liverpool and Manchester. That alone. So what if I say now, well, every black Bahamian need to be able to ride any train for free? You see where I get right? Yeah. You probably agree with me with
Yeah.
that, but to tell them that,
Yeah.
yeah, so reparations for them, and they know that, in my opinion, and that is why it's disregarded.
I want to ask the Queen Mother a question too, because I want to find out, would it be fair to say all these questions regarding the British and reparations can be answered by assessing how much did slavery contribute to the British economy?
It probably 95%, I would say. And they're still reaping the benefits of it today.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
two agree that it's impossible to pay?
It is.
Yeah.
And then we could never forget what they would have done. And you know, I believe that we returned. So how could we possibly forget what was done to our great-great-great-grandmothers
Yeah.
and our great-great-great-grandfathers?
Do you think, and it's something that I've thought about, especially as we've seen the stories of reparations and the fight for it in different jurisdictions, do you think that it's maybe a case where I don't want to set a precedent? Because if I set the precedent,
They're afraid to.
then
That's
maybe
it.
maybe it means then that I will
That's
have
it.
to be on the hook forever
That's
and,
it.
and maybe I don't want to
That's
start
it.
something that
Right.
I'm not prepared to
That
finish.
is
Do you think that
exactly
that
what it is.
I
And
think
to lose financially
Yeah.
is the biggest thing, because that's where it all began.
Right.
Yeah.
Finances.
To put it in
But capitalism, boom,
To
right?
put it in
Yeah.
perspective, of course, we know that Rastafari has been talking about reparations, repatriation, this connection to Africa, getting what's ours for years.
I
used to-
remember it when I first started in the business in 2006 when I did
Right.
the first interview with the Reverend Rithman McKinney.
Yeah, you guys just
And,
gonna,
yeah,
know,
I remember
and-
walking in and I was greeted
yeah.
with a chant.
Right, reparate.
You know,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
And he said, he doesn't he would know me, I long-winded, but me, long time, he said, Chris, you know what we need? Half of everything y'all love, half. And we know it's more than half, so settle for half.
Right, so it's almost like that analogy using the bank, right? So I'll just cut my losses, but this is what I'll need,
you get it, right.
to make up for, right?
You know? And shout out to the Rastafari community, all the conscious communities out there.
Sure.
Doing that thing, right.
You know, as we ask if King Charles will entertain talks of reparation, we talked about it earlier, but I want to go back because I want to tell you about the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who has dismissed a call for the government to apologize and pay reparations for the UK's historic role in slavery. The Labour MP there, who is Bell Ribeiro Adi, asked if he would make a full and meaningful apology and commit to reparatory justice, but the PM said no. He responded no, adding at the same time that trying to unpick our history, it's not the right way forward. Now, the UK government, it has not formally apologized for its role in the trade, but in this country we say, God save the king.
Yeah, yes we do.
Your thoughts?
Well, I can just disregard the God save the king thing. I would rather them say God save that fella who just got killed over the hill the other day. But hey, that's neither here nor there. Now, it's just absolute for me. So Chucky Boy and the rest of them over there in England, they know exactly what it is. The current Prime Minister actually reminds me very much of Mahatma Gandhi.
And just so the audience knows, Chucky Boy is your reference to King Charles
Yeah,
III,
King Charles,
right?
yeah,
Okay.
Chucky Boy, yeah. So,
yes.
Chucky Boy and those, they know exactly what's going on. And despite the fact that not an ounce of blame should be placed on any African for an African genocide, you know, we have African kings and chiefs who have apologized formally. So it shows you the level of morality, the level of humanity, the level of political decorum that our brothers have in Africa.
And perhaps speaks to character, even?
And speaks to character. Now, this person who in charge now reminds me a lot of Mahatma Gandhi. Well, a lot of people don't know, and I don't think Martin Luther King even knew, because he was actually after his time that Mahatma Gandhi was a raging racist. And unfortunately, the British were masters at this. To speak frankly, the British always, when it came to African people, had to have a buffer. And what they're doing now is still using that buffer. And they're using people of color to now do their dirty work. You understand? And so, with this buffer, every colonial British colony had it. In the Bahamas, it was the Greeks. You understand?
Yeah.
In South Africa, it was the East Indians. You understand?
Yeah.
And so, they
So
are
it's
also colonized victims, but they are higher on this totem pole of social Darwinism established by the British, and they just higher up on the pole, and they in the bucket, and we all in survival mode, and they don't want to be where we is, so they got to stay where
so
they are.
So point blank, it's no God save the king for you.
No. So I would say the opposite, actually, but I leave that right there. Yeah.
Interesting. Queen Mother, your thoughts on that?
There's none of that for me, because they still view us the same way they did from his mother and grandmother's time. They view us as inferior to them. And I consider myself superior, right? And so there will be none of that for me. And they will not apologize because they do not think they did anything wrong. Because they think we're inferior.
I'm just curious, but I just have to ask, did you happen to catch the king's coronation back on May 6th?
I was in a bad mood all week that week. But
Okay.
I mean,
I didn't watch it. No.
Yeah, we didn't watch it.
Okay.
And I have to speak frankly, you know, and I'm not trying to, you know, put myself on any pedestal, but I was bestowed one of the greatest honors in Africa. And I have actually attained the throne of the man that we celebrate twice a year, every year. Even white Bahamians celebrate him. You understand?
All right.
Yet, how many people went to the coronation? You know, and how many people came to mine? So I think we speak it in, again, Anglophilia, irrational love of all things English. Yeah.
Do you think that has a lot to do with the fact that you have taken that journey and delved into the roots to really understand it? Do you think it's really perhaps just because majority of people may not necessarily be on that.
That's
on
why
that journey.
we must
Yeah.
continue to say,
Yeah.
and our actions have to speak louder than our words. We need to do what Christopher's title of his book is. We need to begin to black rinse all the whitewashing that has been done to us over the years. We went, one of our trips to Ghana, a Facebook post, a guy that's darker than I am was arguing that we're not Africans, and he's not African, and he's darker than I am. So we've been so brainwashed, and things have been whitewashed.
So I'll ask one last question. What do you say then to Bahamian royalists, for lack of a better way to put it, Bahamians that embrace the crown? What do you say to them?
I mean, for me, and this is not casting aspersion on anyone, you know, I grew up around the Anglican Church. I was an altar boy and all of these things. And sometimes when we say things, people might take it as a personal attack on them personally. But honestly, royalists in this country are diametrically opposed to the motto of this country: forward, onward, upward, together. Simple, you know, and they are extremely harmful. And when I first began as a historian, well, I wasn't a historian yet. I was just a little attendant, you know. But when I first started, there was a very well-known person with a lot of power and clout within that history space.
Yeah.
And she heard us talking about, you know, our feelings, similar things that we're saying now. And this woman came to me, wag a finger at me, and tell me how us young people, we don't know the glory of being a British citizen. There's another book that just came out where somebody wrote it who was actually likes to brag about their Yoruba heritage. And then the first paragraph of the book talking about we were British slaves, and then we became British citizens. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, obviously a disconnect,
right? Yeah, so
yeah,
they are harmful, incredibly harmful, particularly to the youth. And the youth are not, as we say, on that run no more at all.
Your final thoughts?
For me, it's just we need to educate our people. We need to look at who we are. We need to trace where we came from and not just believe one side of the story that has been forced, fed to us.
Yeah.
And I want us to understand that the ancestors are walking now.
This is a good point. This is a good point to close out on. Christopher Davis and Angelique McKay, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you guys with us again soon. Thank you so much. It's been a very insightful conversation.
Thank you.
It's gave me a lot to think about and make my own connections after this. All right, we're going to take a quick break here and return with what's trending on social media. You're watching On the Record. Stay close. Welcome back. Let's have a look now at what's trending on social media. Well, teller number 7 tweets, "Sand, sea, and sunshine ain't cheap no more," while reposting statistics that show the Bahamas coming in at number 4 for the world's most expensive places to live. Now, I can say this. The fact that the Bahamas is a favorite tourist destination and the fact that we are a favorite place for foreign direct investment. Of course, it's going to cost more money, but that just means me and every other millennial out there has to pay $2,500 and up for rent. We are, in my mind, I don't see New York on here or the United States. It's interesting, they're at number 16. But I mean, cost of rent in New York and here, comparable. Bahamian Flame also tweeting says, "Please like, retweet, and share, screenshot and forward. We need as much exposure as possible to bring Kyle home. This young man, Kyle Carey, is missing and his parents want him home." I saw this in the police WhatsApp group, and even my sister and others sent it to me, and My heart just went out to his family, and I hope that they find him soon. Christy CVN says Florida's immigration bill affects everyone, not just undocumented immigrants. SB 1718 is attempting to make it a felony to drive, house undocumented people for any reason. If you are driving or living with an undocumented friend, parent, etc., you could be charged. My heart is heavy. So it just means that you can't give no rides when you go to Florida next time. Jawara Adams posts back in time to Nassau, Bahamas from 1876 to 1900s to 1930s to 1940s. Pictures of good and decent times in Nassau. I love to see what this town looked like back in that era. One of the websites that I visit often when I want to take a stroll down memory lane, even though it's really not my memory, but it's good to see, is vintagebahamas.com. They have a lot of photos of what Rawson Square looked like, what Parliament Square looked like, all of downtown. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff like he was, then I'd say head over to vintagebahamas.com. And McKay Glynn's retweeting a post from The Guardian on maritime saying, it's about time we start investing in recognizing this maritime industry in the Bahamas. And he's got some photos posted there of the new port that's about to open soon. I had an opportunity to actually do a tour with the police commissioner a few months ago, and it was magnificent, and it wasn't even all the way done just yet. So I'm sure it's going to be exciting. It's going to bring in millions more passengers. It's going to up our capacity to welcome tourists to our shores. I just hope we're ready for that. I'll leave it there. In our look at what's trending now on social media, make sure to comment on our Facebook page telling us what you like about the show. And until then, it's going to put a wrap on our show tonight. Our topic, the crown, reparations, will we ever see it? And our guests were Christopher Davis, Nana Safohene, Ahanta Tribe, and Angelique McKay, Queen Mother of Ahanta Tribe. Make sure and tune in next week when we have another exciting topic that directly affects the lives of Bahamians. Until then, I'm Kendeno Knowles. Take care.